Thank you, man. God bless you. Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you so much for letting me meet with you. I hear from Chad, Chad, and from so many others about the exciting things that are going on in this ministry. And I'm honored, I'm privileged to be just a little part of it tonight. I've come to tell you a very, very sad story with a very, very happy ending. And my goal is not primarily to inform. My goal is to share some crucially important insights into a very relevant, a very important issue in your life right now that's going to become even more and more important going forward. And it all revolves around the story of our son. We have a son. It was 12 years ago, last Friday. Tomorrow will be a week ago. 12 years ago, we buried our son. He had died with AIDS. Let me tell you the story of Van Wisdom. We had an older daughter, we have a younger daughter, and in the middle was Van Joseph. Van was an outstanding young man in many ways. He was a good student. He had an unbelievably winsome, winning personality. He was better than average as an athlete. He played on a tennis team and swam on a swim team that won a state championship when he was in high school. He had many, many opportunities, many honors that were given to him. Not super so, but he was very, very solid in many, many ways, what we would call a very solid person. He went off to college. At college, he became a cheerleader, a yell leader. He became an all-American yell leader and taught cheering and gymnastics and those kinds of things around the country. I just had some great, great opportunities. We didn't know until after he graduated from university that our son had been sexually abused when he was about 7 or 8 years of age. For reasons that are still unknown to us, I know some of them, but not all of them. Shame, fear about what I might say, we might say, his mother and I might say, whatever, I don't know, but for whatever reason, he never said anything. He just lived with the pain of having been sexually abused, being confused, tremendously confused about his own sexual identity. As he grew up, that became more confused. Now, we didn't know that, but he was in high school. He was very popular, very popular. He had a girlfriend that we thought he could get very serious about. Wonderful Christian girl. But anyway, when he got off to college, he became friends with some guys who convinced him that maybe he was a closet homosexual and that he needed to be free and he needed to step out. Long story short, when he graduated from the university, because we had served as missionaries in Mexico and we spoke Spanish and he spoke Spanish very fluently, he took a job in Spain. He went to Spain, we thought, to work. He really went, later on, he told us, to get away from the family. He didn't want to hurt the family. I was a pastor of a Baptist church, and his older and his younger sister just adored him. We all did, and he was so ashamed and so afraid of hurting us and hurting my ministry that he decided he'd go and live in Europe. He also went because he really wanted to let his hair down and really engage in that lifestyle that he was convinced was the way that he had been created and that he was just going to go full throttle ahead. While he was there, he became HIV positive. He came back home very, very dejected, got a job here in Houston. They came and told us, we found out about all of this while he was working on a master's degree at University in North Texas, and we
we fluctuated between appealing to him to come back, get your senses right, man, and on one hand, in a loving way, and the other hand was, what in the Sam Hill do you think you're doing? You're going to ruin your life. Now, we didn't know at that time, nor did he, that he was HIV positive. But with time, we found out. When he first found out, he just dug in. He thought, well, now I am surely locked in. I'll never have a normal life. I'll never marry. No one will ever want me, and I will just go ahead and do whatever I want to do. And for a short while, he just became hard-hearted and very resistant to us. But 2 or 3 things happened to him. God used 2 or 3 things to melt his heart. One is he had lymphoma, cancer of the lymph nodes, known as the young man's cancer. Next to skin cancer, it's the best cancer to have because there's about a 98% cure rate. But because he was HIV and we didn't know it at that time, his immune system was down. Well, they found out during that time that he was HIV positive. That was the second thing that happened to him that softened his heart. At first, I'm telling you, it just hit him in the face, he said, like a strong fist. And it overwhelmed him. But the third thing that God used, I think, to soften our son's heart was that he, in his heart of hearts, dearly loved his mother and me and his sisters. And I'll tell you another thing he dearly loved. Follow me. He dearly loved the time when he was close to God, when he was loving Jesus, when he was going to church, when he was praying, when he was going to youth camp and all of those things. He remembered that old life. Kind of like the story about the prodigal son, who went away and wasted everything that he had in riotous living, and then he came back broke and broken and was received back home. And that was true of Van, our son. He came back to God. A long story that I don't have time, nor I think you're particularly interested in knowing all the details. Many things happened that led up to, at that time I was the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Katy. And on a Sunday night, he gave his testimony. He was very transparent. He held nothing back. He told them everything. I don't mean in graphic terms, but he told them exactly his wrong choices and what had happened and where he was, and probably his life was going to be very short, but that he was coming back to Jesus Christ no matter what. He did. Out of that came a wonderful, wonderful ministry. I wish you knew of the ministry that God gave him and the great wisdom and discernment and understanding of things that God gave him. All of a sudden, people came from north, south, east, and west, literally from every direction, wanting counsel, wanting to ask him about their child or their friends or themselves. Not only things that related to sexuality and homosexuality particularly, but just about things in general. So much so that he began a ministry called New Beginnings, at which he ministered to every Monday night about 300 people who they themselves or their family members were struggling with some kinds of issues, many of them sexually related. By the way, my wife and I have taken up that banner, and we have it here at we call it Second Beginnings, and we meet on Wednesday nights at 6:30. If anybody's interested, or you know someone who might be interested. In fact, we've got a couple of, and we deal with addictions, we deal with all kinds of things, certainly not just sexual issues. In fact, that's not even the primary issues that we deal with. So I'm just saying that we have people who come just needing to be encouraged and be supported to deal with whatever is going through their lives. Our son became a mighty man of God. His testimony, ladies and gentlemen, literally went around the world. He and I were invited to London, England, to give a father-son testimony at the International Congress of Exodus. Exodus is a Christian ministry organization that helps people who want to come out of homosexuality or ministers to their families education, all kinds of help. My wife and I had been with him to 4 or 5 conventions around the country, and we were found out, and he and I went and gave our testimony. He gave his testimony in Israel. He gave his testimony in Argentina, and the CD that he made, that testimony that night at First Baptist Church, literally went to South Africa. It went to New Zealand. It went to Australia. It went to places in Europe. It went all over the world. Before he died, he had 5 years of ministry, and God restored the years in those 5 years that the locusts had destroyed in all the years leading up to that. God does that. When God restores us, God often, in His grace and mercy, reaches back and He pulls all that we've missed, all that we've blown, all that we have lost. He pulls all of that up and He compresses it into a short time so that in Van's life and in the lives of many, many other people, and I'm sure I'm speaking to some here tonight, who would say, in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years of my life, I felt like I've had more of God and more of life than I had all those other years put together. That could be true of you. Now, that's the story. Why do I tell you that story? I tell you that story for 2 or 3 reasons. First of all, it may be that some of you have been sexually abused. Sexual abuse is rampant. It's epidemic. I'm not exaggerating. I don't know, but I would venture that not the largest percentage, maybe, but there is a strong percentage of those of us who are here tonight, were sexually abused. I don't mean raped. I don't mean abused. When we think of sexual abuse, we think of cruel things. I'm talking about just things that would throw a person into a psychosexual world, and they'd not know how to respond to it. 90-some% of all male homosexuals, for instance, were sexually abused as children. That doesn't mean that all men who have been sexually abused are homosexuals. I'm not saying that. Please don't hear me say that. I'm just saying that children, male and female, who were sexually abused often have issues that they're going to have to deal with, and they turn to drugs, or they turn to alcohol, or they turn to promiscuous living, or they turn to one crazy thing after the other, looking for some kind of solution, something that will reach way down deep inside them and scratch where they're itching, and it doesn't. So I'm saying to you, one of the reasons I'm telling you this story, if you've been sexually abused, go get some help. Go talk to somebody. Find somebody who is older than you, who is wiser than you, and who will understand and share your heart. That might be Chad, that might be me, it might be Second Beginnings, it might be a professional counselor, it may be somebody else, just a Christian man or woman, men going to men, women going to women that you know and that you have confidence in, and go to them and share with them. That's one reason I'm telling this story. Let me tell you another reason I'm telling the story. I'm telling the story because we are living, you guys do not know. I'm 76 years old, and I cannot tell you the changes that I have seen in the 50-some years that I've been in the ministry. But you guys, you're all young, and you see things, and you are part of a major social upheaval of changes that's going to sweep you along with it. Now, those of you who are Christians, who are Christ followers, those of you who sang those songs that we sang a few minutes ago from your heart and not just the beat, you weren't just wasting time. You weren't just getting emotionally happy. You were singing those about the cross and about God's amazing grace, and you're going to praise God because the breath that is in you came from God. Those of you I want to talk to and tell you, how do you respond to the homosexual issue? And how do you deal with your friends who may be engaged or may be very favorable about some kind of sexual deviation or other issue? How do we approach them? See, when I went to the ministry 55 years ago, even the doctors, even the physicians, and certainly all the psychological associations said that homosexuality was an illness. That same-sex attraction was against nature. That we had been created male and female, and if men weren't attracted to women, or women were not attracted to men, but they were attracted to same sex, they were ill. Now that has changed. But it has not only changed, it has inverted completely. So that now, if you believe, as I believe, that homosexuality is not right, you are sick. You are ill. The problem is with me that I would think. And here's what they say. First of all, they say, look, we know that homosexuality or same-sex attraction is something that's born into people. Some people are born short. Some people are born tall. Some people have dark eyes. Some people have blue eyes. Some people have black hair. Some people have red hair or brown hair. It is what it is. Embrace it. Go ahead and stop fighting against the way God made you. Does God make, in fact, the big issue in homosexuality is it nature that is stamped upon us that causes us to be attracted to the same sex? Or is it nurturing our environment, what we are taught, what we're pushed into? Like, for instance, I mentioned about children who are sexually abused often get very confused sexually and wind up choosing some kind of deviant or very promiscuous or whatever it is lifestyle because of what happened to them during their psychosexual development time. So the thing that I want to say to you who are conscientious Christians, because I understand from Chad that you are studying issues that are relevant and that are hot topics in the world right now, and that you're going to face more and more, not less and less. You're going to see a ton more of this stuff than I ever saw. You're going to be confronted, and you probably right now have friends, classmates, people with whom you work, maybe family members, and maybe there are some here tonight who have attraction to the same sex. What does the Bible say about that? In the Old Testament, it says it very clearly. It's an abomination. It's a sin. In the New Testament, in Romans chapter 1, you remember when Dr. Young taught us from Romans, the first chapter, when he first started teaching the book of Romans. And in the very first chapter, it says that men and women were so resistant to God that men began to burn, that is, to sexually desire other men. And women began to sexually desire other women. And they were so set that God, one of the harsh phrases in all the Bible says, God gave them over. That is to say, God said, okay, I'm not going to try. You just go ahead and do what you want to. You'll find out from experience. You'll find out on your own whether or not this is the life that you want for yourself. So I want to encourage you and I want to challenge you about working and living with, as a Christian out in society, with friends who, and this issue is going to come up. Is it nature or is it nurture? I'm not going to try to explain to you all of the different arguments one way or the other, but I will give this. In fact, let me just tell you where I stand. I think it is partially nature. And I think it is strongly nurture. I do think there is such a thing as being born with a stronger sexual identity. Let's use this analogy. On a scale of 1 to 10, if you're born with a sexual identity, that is, you have the genes in you which you've inherited from your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, for on and on and on. If you have a sexual identity that's very, very weak, a 2 or a 3, that means that you're not going to be, it's going to be a, kind of take it or leave it kind of attitude. If you are an 8 or a 9, you're going to be very sexually aware and very sexually driven. I give you an example. In my day, and there still are, I know that there are some outstanding, wonderful men and women who never married. They never married. Why? Well, one possibility is they were homosexuals, though they lived in a time when you just didn't dare even breathe it. You just sucked it up and just kept on going. But I don't think so. I think that many of them, I mean, that's possible. I think many of them just had, on that scale of 1 to 10, they were a 3 or a 4. It just never became, and they got caught up in their professions or something or the other. A lot of women, for instance, have chosen not to marry and take care of elderly parents. And they wait so long that they go beyond the marrying time. Maybe their sexual drive was not that strong. There are missionaries. Missionaries are famous for going out as young adults like you and going to a foreign country and learning the culture and learning the language and bringing the gospel to them and loving and putting down roots, but never developing that aspect and never developing a dating life or an interest in. Maybe they have a 3 or a 4. I will give some room to that. I will give some credibility to that. But I do believe that the environment, like my son, I don't know where my son was on that scale. I don't know if he was a 3 or a 4 or if he was 5 or 6, but I do know one thing. I am convinced from the counseling that he and I went together to, and from the study that I've made, an in-depth study, I've written a book on it, I am convinced that his being sexually abused pushed him into a whirlwind of confusion about who am I growing up. Psychosexual, at a very tender, very pliable, very moldable stage of his development, he just got all confused. And that is the work of Satan. That's what he loves to do with you and with me. Maybe you have absolutely not even the least inkling of attraction to the same sex. But you've got other issues that you find that are very easily to attach themselves to you because you saw it in your family when you were growing up. Last night in Second Beginnings, one of our participants told us about growing up in a family where his grandparents every day drank themselves into a drunken stupor. And his father every day drank himself into a drunken stupor. To grow up in that kind of environment, what do you think happened to this young man that was in our Second Beginnings last night? He became an alcoholic. And then he went over to drugs. It was the nurturing, it was the environment, it was the forces that pushed him that way. But here's the deal. Let's say, if your friends say to you, look, I am gay because I was born this way, I would say not to fight them, not to argue with them. I would say, well, let me ask you this. If you have no interest in the opposite sex, and you're truly interested in a same-sex kind of attitude toward life, you don't have to act on your homosexuality. Well, wait a minute, what do you mean I don't have to act on it? I mean, you don't have to act on it. For instance, you can say, if you're a heterosexual, I am a heterosexual, and I am capable of being attracted to more than one woman, or more than, if you're a woman, more than one man. And there are some people who are. We know that there are men and women who love each other passionately and devotedly, but one of them will fall into an affair, could fall into an affair. I would say to a person who says, I have a strong sex drive, and even though I love my wife, I am attracted to this woman that I work with. Well, what I would say is, it is incumbent upon you to develop the discipline of knowing when to say no. I mean, just because you're getting a late start to work on Monday morning and you're going from here downtown on I-10, does not give you freedom to drive 100 miles an hour in that traffic on Monday morning and on I-10. That would be crazy. You have to say no. You have to say to yourself, I've got to get an earlier start, or I'm going to push the envelope, but I've got to be very careful. I'll have a wreck, or I'll get a ticket, or I'll kill myself or kill someone else. Saying no in appropriate times and appropriate ways is altogether the thing to do. And as my wife and I have counseled so many people who struggle with same-sex attraction. And I say to them, listen, if it is really deeply embedded in you, it's not going to easily come out of you. But I'm telling you, if you want to be a Christian, you're going to have to say no. You're going to have to ask God to put other things in your life that's going to give you a deep, deep sense of accomplishment so that your life is not a waste. I'm thinking, well, okay, I'll give you an illustration that you all know. I mean, you know partially about it. Taylor High School. When I moved here 30 years ago, Mr. Taylor was one of the most honored men in Katy. I admired that man very much. He had been in education in Katy for many, many years. And he eventually worked his way up and became the superintendent. And you know what he was married to that job. He believed it was a calling. He was a very strong Christian man, a godly man, and he felt like God had equipped him and given him a love to develop a solid school system that would give young people great education in a wonderful environment. Mr. Taylor never married. He died as an elderly man, never having married. But I would say that if Mr. Taylor were here tonight, he would not say to you and me, my life was just a big waste because I never got married. Now, don't misunderstand me. I think the vast majority of us are going to get married. I'm thankful that the Lord let me get married. If I had to do over again, I'd do it again. I mean the same woman. Excuse me, honey. I want you to know that. But my point is that there's nothing wrong with saying no. And that's one thing that we can say. Now, the pain, let me talk to you just very quickly and a little bit about the pain that is in a situation like this. There was a lot of pain. First of all, there's pain to your friend and to our son, your friend, the homosexual. There's a lot of pain. Please don't minimize that. You know, homosexuality is known as what? Being what? Gay. Well, there are a lot of gay times that take place when there's a gathering, but I want you to know it is a documented fact that homosexual people are very deeply pained. Your friend, the homosexual, may have the greatest personality and may have the most winsome ways and may look like he's got the world by the tail and he's going downhill. But I can tell you there is pain in his or her life. So as a Christian, you keep that in mind in dealing with them. Another thing, part of that pain is the rejection. A part of that pain is shame. And I believe a part of it is intuitively knowing this is not right. This is not right. So when you relate to your friend at school or at work, wherever it is, don't stop counting them as your friend. Treat them as you would your heterosexual friends. Be kind, want the best for them. They deserve the rights that you and I have, the basic rights. And we want to stand up for that. And we don't want to make fun, and we don't want to pour gas on their pain. That's not helping anything. There's a lot of pain. Our son was not a drinker. Hear me now. He was not a drinker. But he told me after he got his life straightened out, he said, there were a few times, Dad, that I was so depressed and I was so down in the dumps. I thought about suicide, or I tried to drown my sorrow by soaking myself in alcohol. Not literally, by drinking alcohol and getting drunk. So he was not he didn't even like social drinking for himself. But he did it. Why? Because of the pain. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of pain for the family. Oh, I tell you the pain that my poor wife went through. My daughters went through. And I have to tell you about the pain that I went through. First of all, when I heard about it, I said, my ministry is over. I have failed as a father, as a husband, and as a pastor, and I have no right to be pastoring a church. And so I was going to leave the ministry. That would have been one of the most major mistakes of my life, but that's what Satan was telling me. You are weak. You are not a good father. You are not. You see, in my studies about some of the things that contribute to homosexuality is in a man, often it's because the boy does not emotionally connect with his father in some ways. So in the psychosexual development of a little boy, he doesn't identify with his father, and they become those two proverbial ships that are passing in the night. See, I felt like that my harsh preaching and teaching against homosexuality caused my son not to come to me. Why didn't he come to me? Why didn't he tell me that he had been sexually abused? Why didn't? Well, I think maybe I scared him off, not realizing I was scaring him off. Never entered my mind that he had been sexually abused. So there's a lot of pain in the family. Initially, for Van and for me, it was, we just bumped heads. And then we would break down and weep, and we'd say, "Oh, Van, please, son, please give up this crazy lifestyle. Just look what it's doing to you. Look what it's doing to your family, please." I remember him saying to his mother on more than one occasion, "Mom, you don't understand. It's not that easy. It's not that easy." So there's a lot of pain. Those three things that I mentioned, when he developed that lymphoma, became HIV positive, and it looked like he was going to die, and he did within 5 years. Plus his love for his family. Praise God. There was a deep, deep love in our family. We have always been very close, and we were close. That's the reason why he went to Spain, so that he wouldn't hurt my ministry. He said that. Plus he wanted to get over there where he could really kick up his heels. So, in closing, what is your approach as a Christian young person, and you believe that homosexual activities is wrong? By the way, may I stop and say that again? I do not believe, hear me now, I do not believe it is a sin to be a homosexual. I believe it is a sin to engage in homosexual activities. I do not believe it is a sin for you guys to be attracted sexually to a girl at your work or at your class in your school. But I do think it's a sin if you pursue that and have a sexual relationship with her. So I hope I'm making myself clear here. So what do we say to our friends? How do you face this in coming? And by the way, the law and the culture is going to be against you. You will be swimming upstream. Get ready. You need two things, and here they are, very important. Get them. Don't miss them, okay? You need compassion for your homosexual friends or family members or neighbors or whoever it might be. You need compassion because the love of Jesus lives in you. Because you know that God tells us that the greatest of all these is love. And that you know that love means acceptance. And you know that love means trying to be fair and following the golden rule. All of those. You need compassion. Please don't lose your compassion. Some people are afraid that if they show compassion or they're compassionate toward their homosexual family members or friends, that they are approving of their lifestyles. No. I can't tell you the number of times that parents have asked my wife and me, "Well, our boy is in home," and we just told him, "We don't want you to come back home. We don't want you to come back home until you get straightened out." And I said, "You can't do that." "Well, if we have him come back home and we sit down and we watch a ball game and we laugh and we tell him, he's going to think that we accept." I said, "No, he won't. You tell him, we don't like your lifestyle, but we love you with all of our hearts, and we are here for you day or night, 7/24, anytime." Compassion, but at the same time, hear me now, is conviction. Conviction about what is right and wrong. Conviction that, and you have to decide where you're in this. Conviction that homosexuality is not God's plan. Homosexuality is because we live in a broken world, a sinful world, where horrible things can happen to innocent people and push them off a cliff. They can begin to make choices that augment that being pushed off of a cliff. And you need both. It'll be a lot easier to have one without the other. Have compassion and say, "Do what you want to, I don't care, I love you." You know, it's every man for himself. Or you can be like Westboro Baptist. It goes around with signs saying, "Fags, God hates fags." God doesn't hate fags. God hates the sin of all of us, my sin and your sin. But He doesn't hate us. And you need both of those. And that's what I'm praying that you'll have, young people. God bless you. I wish I could sit down with each one of you and talk to you for 2 weeks. You are in for one hellacious trial in coming years. I'm telling you. God give you strength. God give you wisdom. God give you courage. God give you the love of Jesus. God give you compassion. God give you conviction. Lord, bless these young people. God, thank you for them. Dear Jesus, bless them, strengthen them, give them wisdom, help them to make wise choices. And Lord, help them to lovingly, courageously, wisely engage anybody who challenges them